All right, hello everyone. So it looks like we are at 6 o'clock. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this neighborhood meeting. So hopefully everyone can at least hear me and maybe see me depending on their device and what their screen situation is. So good evening. My name is Hannah Oden and I'm a senior planner with the town of Oro Valley. And I'm also the town's project manager reviewing the applicant's proposal. And I will also be facilitating tonight's meeting. So I want to thank you all for joining us for this neighborhood meeting regarding the proposed general plan amendment and rezoning for a commercially zoned, so similar to the Safeway across Tangerine Road, and vacant property located near the southeast corner of the First Avenue and Tangerine Road intersection. All right, next slide, please. So clearly the mechanics of tonight's meeting are going to be a bit different than our regular in-person meetings. And our number one goal tonight is to hear from you, while ensuring a fair, efficient, and productive meeting. You've heard a lot from the applicant regarding their proposal and from the town regarding the process. So tonight is really the first opportunity for you to directly share your concerns and ask questions. We are going to do our very best to get through as many questions and comments as we can tonight. So everyone's microphone, other than myself, will be muted throughout the meeting tonight, unless it's your turn to speak. And this is to ensure a smooth and efficient meeting as possible. So only I can turn on your microphone at the appropriate time when it's your turn, at which point you will be able to ask a question or provide comments. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Zoom, I will provide a quick how-to on raising your computer or telephone activated virtual hand when you have a question. Now, tonight's meeting is scheduled to go no later than 8 p.m. And I'd like to note that this Zoom meeting video and the PowerPoint presentation will be posted on the project's webpage as soon as possible. So we have found that Zoom does take a few days to process the recording. However, we will post it immediately once we receive it. And comments will also be posted online on the project webpage in a neighborhood meeting summary and forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council when they consider the applications. All right, next slide, please. So where are we in the process? So we've produced 2 informational videos that have been posted on this project's webpage on ovprojects.com. I hope all of you have seen those videos as they contain detailed information about the applicant's proposal and the process. So this evening, we intend to build on the information provided in those videos with the aim to make the meeting more productive. So starting in August and September, we are anticipating conducting in-person neighborhood meetings if it is safe to do so. So the applicant can get additional feedback about their proposal. If in-person meetings are not feasible at that time, additional Zoom meetings, so similar to tonight, will be offered. So when these meetings are scheduled, yellow card notices will be sent out in advance of each meeting, so please be on the lookout for those. If you have not received a postcard for this project in the recent past and you would like to receive them in the future, please email ask@orovalleyaz.gov to be sure you get one for the upcoming neighborhood meetings mailing list. Yellow signs with meeting information will also be posted on the subject property. So the general plan amendment and rezoning are scheduled for 2 meetings before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and those will take place in October and November. And lastly, Town Council will consider the requests at a public hearing in December. So per state law, Town Council must consider a general plan amendment in the same calendar year that it was submitted. So the hearing scheduled in December will satisfy the state mandated requirement. All right, next slide, please. So again, the purpose of this meeting is to build upon the 2 videos that have already been generated, as it's generated a number of questions and comments, and most importantly, it gives us the opportunity gives you the opportunity to share your comments and have your questions answered directly. So the agenda for tonight's meeting is, so first the applicant's representative, Mr. Paul Oland, is going to provide a brief overview of the project. Now, since the informational videos, the applicant has added a proposed townhome and single-family residential concept, which they can provide more information on during their presentation. So after that, it will be your turn. So at this point, I'd like to provide some additional information on what we have done with the questions and comments received to date and the plan moving forward. So first, your first round of questions and comments were used as the foundation for the second informational video, which was posted on April 30th. So again, if you haven't seen that video, please visit ovprojects.com to do so. Secondly, they're being used as the basis of this meeting to help inform the conversation. From all the comments we received, staff anticipates that there are at least four core topics that you'll bring forward tonight. So these include additional development on this property, compatibility with surrounding neighbors, especially concerning views, the impact of adding traffic to First Avenue, as well as the demand for more senior care. So questions and comments are certainly not limited to this list, but we know that they have been frequently mentioned and look forward to the upcoming discussion. We have asked the applicant to be prepared and invited key town staff representatives. I do want to emphasize that we are in the very early stages of the applicant's proposal and that your feedback is critical in helping shape an ultimate proposal that will be considered by town council. Public participation has shaped every general plan amendment and rezoning application in Oro Valley, and we expect this one will be no different. So it's important to stay engaged in the process. So following your questions and comments, I'll provide additional information about the next steps, and then I'll conclude by reiterating upcoming opportunities for public participation. All right, and with that, now I'd like to turn it over to the applicant, Mr. Paul Oland, for their presentation. Just give me a moment here. All right, Mr. Oland, it looks like you are unmuted and ready to go whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Odin. Hi, everybody. This is Paul Oland with Paradigm Land Design. I'm representing the property owner tonight in this application. I'll just, as Ms. Odin said, I'll just briefly go over our proposal here. A lot of this information we've presented in the informational videos before, so I'll just take a few minutes to go over it more quickly. So this property is, of course, on the southeast quadrant of Tangerine and First. On this slide here, it's shown as the one with the star on it. It's about 13.5 acres, and it was zoned a number of years ago as C1 commercial as part of a rezoning of the overall plan there. About 160 acres, a quarter section that included the villages at Silverhawk subdivision, which is about 2/3 built out now, and the last third is under construction there to the south of the site. The rezoning also included Block 4, which is the piece immediately to the west of the subject property, which is also zoned for C1 commercial development. At the time, what we believed was that there was still a lot of undeveloped land in Oro Valley, a fair amount, not a ton, but a reasonable amount of undeveloped residential land, and we expected that a reasonable amount of density would get developed on it. What's happened in the intervening years is that nearly all that land has been built out, but it's been built out at densities that's pretty typical of what happens in Oro Valley, which is somewhere between 2 and 2.5 homes per acre gross, which is not very high density from a retail standpoint in terms of providing a reasonable or necessary amount of rooftops to support commercial. So what ends up happening is that we've got this piece of property, which in the context of just this corner is limited in its ability to compete as a viable retail parcel. It has poor visibility. You cannot see it very well from the intersection of Tangerine and First. You cannot see it very well from First, and you cannot see it at all for most of Tangerine Road. And of course, visibility is key to a viable retail site. Also, the distance from the intersection is another issue. This corner here, what you can see in red, is about 80 acres of commercially zoned land just at this corner. And so you can see that obviously we've got the The Safeway Center and the center on the southwest corner, both of those are developed. They're not strong, but they are developed. The remaining acreage has been zoned for quite some time. The commercial acreage north of Tangerine has been zoned for 30 or 35 years, and only part of it, as you can see, has been developed. So demand is not strong, and this parcel is hindered in its ability to compete by several factors: visibility, distance. Obviously, there's more suitable land. Even Block 4 to the west, we believe is much more suitable. It's right on the corner, and we hope and believe that someday that will be viable as a commercial center. And then, as I mentioned, weak demand throughout the region. Amazon has had a huge impact on brick and mortar retail, and Oro Valley is no different. Oro Valley, of course, has got quite a bit lower density than typical anyway. So if you look around, most retailers in Oro Valley are not doing too well. If you can go to the next slide, please, Ms. Sims. This is the site plan that was approved. This is the site plan that was approved as part of the rezoning. As you can see, it shows a neighborhood shopping center, which at the time we thought would be viable, which we would love to have seen. But the fact of the matter is, for the reasons I already stated, we just are finding that there's continues to be no interest in this piece as a non-residential piece, which is why we're proposing to rezone it for residential use. Next slide, please. This is just a quick graphic. The red X's show where major commercial centers have undergone some significant trouble and in some cases actually lost tenants. And actually, in all three of these cases, the Bastion Center, Oro Valley Marketplace, and then down there by Home Depot, all three of those large shopping centers, which are key in Oro Valley, have all suffered tenant loss due to Amazon and due to the lack of density in Oro Valley. And of course, the subject property is shown there as the yellow star. Next slide, please. This is kind of a close-up of our proposal. The darker red is Block 4 to the west. That is also Zone C1 commercial. We're proposing to leave it that way because we believe and hope that that will be viable someday. Kai Drive is shown there as a loop road connecting First Avenue up to Tangerine. This is a little bit different than what was shown in the rezoning. The rezoning did not show a connection to Tangerine, but in the years since then, we've been able to coordinate that, and we believe that that will help all these parcels operate more smoothly. It'll help relieve some of the congestion, existing and future congestion at First and Tangerine as well. Portion of Kai Drive is already built, a portion is under construction, and then it will be the last portion heading up and connecting to Tangerine will be built with this project. At Tangerine, we're proposing a right in, right out, left in connection. We're not proposing a left out. We don't think that could be engineered in a safe way. Left out is usually the movement that causes most traffic conflicts after U-turns. So a left in is a much safer movement. So that's all we're proposing there. And we believe that allowing folks who are traveling west on Tangerine to make a left down to connect to these parcels and the residential parcels to the south that are currently under construction will help circulation there at First and Tangerine. Next slide, please. This is the first concept that we're proposing. It is an apartment concept. Unlike some of the other ones in Oro Valley, this is a two-story proposal. The site is currently zoned, as Ms. Odin mentioned, C1 commercial, which has a 25-foot height limit. We're proposing R6 residential, which would carry the same limit. So we're not proposing an increase in height from what's already allowed. This would be a gated community, and access would be off of Kai Drive there. Of course, appropriate setbacks and buffer yards would be provided around the perimeter. Next slide, please. This is a casita proposal. This would be a one-story rental casita option that is similar to some of the other ones that have been built around the Tucson and Phoenix areas over the last few years. There's a high demand for these. The rents are strong, demand is strong, and they're a pretty easy neighbor because they're single story and they provide an option for people who don't want to pursue home purchase, but up in this area with the rents that we would expect, the rents that we see in the area, we would expect this to be mostly populated by people who could afford to purchase homes, but are choosing not to for various lifestyle reasons. Next slide, please. This is a senior care option. There continues to be strong demand for senior care. There are thousands of citizen Americans turning 60 every day, and that will continue for a while. The national peak is expected somewhere in the early 2030s, and after that it will start to decline, but not rapidly. So the demand for senior care, assisted and independent living facilities is expected to remain strong for quite some time. This would be similar to some of the other facilities that have been built in Oro Valley over the years, with access off of Sky Drive as well. Some independent living cottages around the perimeter, and then a central building with centralized facilities, a little bit more intensive assisted living conditions and services available in the main building, and then recreational amenities also. Next slide, please. A townhome option we are also proposing as part of this rezoning. Townhomes have been a product that have been very successful in southern Arizona, primarily Phoenix and in some areas closer to the core of Tucson. We believe there's a market for an upscale townhome product at this location. And so we are proposing to have that as part of our rezoning as well. Next slide. And this is the last proposed concept that we are asking for as part of this rezoning request. It would be a single family product, very similar to the villages of Silverhawk, phases 1, 2, and 3. Just to the south, it would essentially be a fourth phase of that development. And obviously that would dovetail right in with the homes around it. Again, access off Sky Drive only. Next slide, please. The orange area is an existing hill that blocks a significant amount of visibility from Tangerine Road. I probably should have inserted this slide earlier when we were talking about the issues that this property has as a non-residential parcel. But the fact of the matter is this existing hill here blocks most visibility from Tangerine Road. Next slide, please. Another issue or aspect of this property that is a little bit unique in Oro Valley is that it currently has no immediate neighbors. That is not something that you find very often in Oro Valley. Obviously, Villages at Phase 3 is under construction, but there are, as everybody knows, there's no homes built there yet. And so this down zoning that we're proposing would make sense to do right now, just so that the transitional use can get established right now. You can see the distance between this property and some of the surrounding areas is significant. We've got over 350 feet from this property to the Villages Phase 2. We've got over 800 feet from this property to Catalina Shadows to the east. We have over 1,000 feet to the neighborhood over on the other side of First Avenue, and we've got over 2,000 feet to the neighborhood, to the closest neighborhood within Rancho Vistoso. In addition to distance, we've got other things that will block visibility. From Catalina Shadows, this property is not visible from most areas. And from the areas where it is visible, we've got several hundred feet of open space, and there will be homes built in the intermediate area as well. And obviously that's the case for the areas to the west also. We've got a wash, we've got additional homes, we've got First Avenue, all of those things separating existing homes from this property. Next slide, please. The subject property, if anybody has been out walking on it, you'll notice that there's not much mature vegetation at all. And that's because a number of years ago, ADOT graded this area that you can see in the photo. They graded it to remove dirt to construct Tangerine Road and the bridges. So it's ADOT's previous work that is the reason for a lack of much mature vegetation on site. Next slide, please. Trails are the last things I want to talk about. As part of the master plans for the villages at Silverhawk parcels, which was also, of course, zoned at the same time as this property, and the sanctuary at Silverhawk, which was master planned south of Palisades Road at the same time as all of this. Trail alignments were provided. You can see them in red on this slide. What we're proposing to do as part of this proposal is to connect the Kai Drive over to those existing red trail alignments, approximately where the green dash line is shown. And that would provide people who are living in this area, perhaps walking along a sidewalk on Kai Drive. They would have a trail connection over to the more natural trails, heading down to Big Wash and south to the CDO. And it would also provide trail users who are already on those red trails a way to access Kai Drive and some of the commercial services that do or will exist in the future around the intersection of First and Tangerine. That's the summary that I have to give you tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland. So before we get started with your questions, I'd like to explain how you can all participate during this meeting. So during the question and comment period, if you wish to ask a question or make a comment, please raise your computer or telephone generated hand. Now, just to be clear, I don't mean to literally raise your hand in the air. There is a specific computer or virtual feature in Zoom to do this. So there are two ways to accomplish raising your hand. So for those of you who are participating on any platform other than by phone, so as shown on the screen, you'll want to find the participants icon. So this is located either at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your device. So if you click on participants, this will open a dialog box that lists all participants in the meeting. And at the bottom of that participants box, you'll see an option to raise your hand. So if you click that option, your hand will be raised. So alternatively, if you are using an iPad or tablet, you may have the option of selecting the three dots that say more, as also shown on this screen. And if you select that option, you'll have the ability to raise your hand. And for those of you who are participating by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. So raised hands will be moved up to the top of the list in the order in which they were raised. So I'll then announce your name and turn your mute off so that you can speak. So please make sure you are also not muted on your personal device. When I announce who is up to speak, I'll also announce the next person whose turn it will be to speak so that that person will be prepared. Once you have asked your question or made a comment, I will remute you to allow the speaker to provide an answer. So again, we are going to do our best to get through as many questions and comments as possible. So it looks like we do have a number of participants tonight, and we'll do our very best to get to each and every one of you. So please keep your comments or questions to no longer than 3 minutes, out of fairness to all participants who wish to be heard. And I will respectfully remind folks of this guideline as needed. My aim is to keep things moving along in a fair and efficient manner. Again, the goal of this meeting is to have a productive conversation about the project and provide constructive feedback and questions. So please keep that in mind as we move through the meeting tonight. All right, and so with that, we'll go ahead and get started with your questions and comments. So please bear with me. It might take me a moment to find our speakers and unmute folks and move between our speakers. So give me a moment here. All right, and it looks like actually there are no hands currently raised. So if you do have a question or a comment, again, please use that virtual tool on Zoom to raise your hand. All right, and so we do have one hand raised. Mr. Tim Bowen, I will go ahead and unmute you. Just make sure you're also not muted on your end.
Thank you, Hannah.
All right. Looks like you're good to go. Go ahead.
Yeah, would it be possible to go back to the slide in the presentation which shows the blue and orange side by side with Tangerine Boulevard at the top?
I'm sure, yeah, just give us a minute here. Is that the slide that you wanted, Mr. Bowen?
I just wanted to be sure that I understand. It appears that the orange topography is above the blue, the subject property. And my question for the applicant is, this would have seemed to have been an issue not only in 2020, but also in 2015, yet the property was zoned to C1 in 2015. Can the applicant please describe for us the things that may have happened between 2015 and 2020 that couldn't have been reasonably anticipated that might help us in the town understand why this rezoning application is really necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Bowen, I'm going to mute you and I will direct that over to Mr. Paul Oland. All right, Mr. Oland, go ahead.
Thank you, Hannah. Can you hear me okay?
There might still be a little bit of feedback on your end.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's causing that, but I'll try to speak up. I'm sorry about that. So, no, basically, it's what I described in my opening comments. At the time when we rezoned this to C1, there were a couple of things at play. First were the special area policies that were established a number of years ago in the general plan that designated this property and block 4 to the west as commercial. And so our rezoning in 2015 was simply aligning with that, aligning with those planned land uses because they seemed reasonable when the general plan special area policies were put in place, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. I was not involved in that, but at the time, everybody was hoping there would be enough demand to support that much commercial. In 2015, there still appeared to be a window of opportunity with the number of parcels and acreage available for additional homes to be built in Oro Valley. We at the time, there were still parcels along the west bank of Big Wash that were not developed yet. Several hundred acres and several hundred homes up there. There was also a large piece further north. There were a number of parcels over along La Cholla and in between this parcel and there that were available for residential development. They've since been planned and or built for less density than is needed to support this and probably some of the other commercial land in Oro Valley as well. But certainly this piece, because of the things that I described that put it at a competitive disadvantage compared to other commercial parcels, has taken what we thought was a glimmer of hope in 2015 and basically taken it back to nothing. This parcel has been zoned for 5 years as C1. There has been no interest expressed, and the property owners do own other commercial parcels in Oro Valley and around town. So they are active in the tenant market. So in their conversations with various tenants about potential sites for development, this is one that of course is brought into those conversations, but there's never any interest in it for the reasons that I've said. But But honestly, the biggest issue with this property is the lack of density. Retailers simply need more homes, more customers, more employees, more traffic, more people seeing it as they drive by, and more people frequenting these establishments to survive. And that's why retailers in Oro Valley are typically not thriving as they would hope. But rezoning this, downzoning this for a transitional residential use that would provide a little bit more density than the typical 2 to 2.5 homes per acre would certainly help some of the existing retailers, as well as take a less viable commercial piece off the table.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Oland. All right, so it looks like there are no other hands raised right now. So again, if you do have a question or a comment about the proposal, please, you can use that virtual raise hand feature on your device. If you are calling in by phone, you just need to press *9, and that will raise your hand as well so that you can provide a comment or ask a question. We'll just wait for a few minutes here. I definitely want to give folks the opportunity to ask a question or provide a comment. Oh, and we do have a hand raise. Miss, apologies if I mispronounce your first name, but Marlon Weathers, I will go ahead and unmute you. Please also make sure you're not muted on your end. Ms. Weathers, I think you might be muted on your end, on your personal device. So if you could just go ahead.
I think I got it now, right?
Oh, yes. Yes, you're good. Thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead with your question.
You guys have been doing a great job for one. But we do have a question on the right end coming off of Tangerine. We're just wondering how big that's going to be, and are they going to do it so you're safely out of traffic when you're making that turn? Tangerine travels at a pretty fast pace, so we're kind of concerned, you know, of making a turn and being rear-ended.
Sure, no, thank you very much for that question. I am going to give the applicant an opportunity to address that traffic issue. And then we also do have our town engineer, Mr. Paul Kiesler, on the meeting, who can follow up with additional information. All right, Mr. Oland, go ahead.
So as part of the proposal, a traffic report will be prepared by a traffic engineer. It will analyze not only the traffic volumes that would be associated with what we're proposing compared to what would have been the volumes under the existing commercial zoning, but it'll also analyze the connection point there to Tangerine. And town staff has already indicated to us that in addition to the normal horizontal visibility analysis that needs to take place, we also need to look at the vertical visibility because of the fact that Tangerine starts sloping down as you approach this point. So what I would expect What I expect that analysis to show is that given the speed and the slope of the road, we may need a right turn lane to be installed, a right turn bay there ahead of our connection point of sufficient size to allow people to decelerate outside of the through traffic lanes. That would be my expectation once that traffic report is done. And of course, whatever the traffic report shows, that's subject to review and approval by the town, and they will ultimately dictate what we need to do to provide a safe connection point at that location.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Oland. I'm now going to unmute Mr. Paul Kiesler, who is our town engineer with Oro Valley and can provide some additional information about that question. All right, Mr. Kiesler, you are unmuted and go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Oden, and thank you, Mr. Oland. I really don't have a lot to add on this one. Mr. Oland, I did a very good job of covering. We will be looking at this. We need to look at the safeness of the ability for people to turn out of traffic, and as the constituent mentioned, it is at a high speed and it is downhill. So I expect that we will see a right turn lane there, but we'll have to do all the study to find out. And on top of that, we'll also have to look at the sight lines, as Mr. Olin was saying.